I'm Bill Daly, a member of the Board of Directors of our Homeowners Association. Today I'm going to talk to you about traffic safety in Hackberry Creek. Last year one of our residents came to a board meeting to express his concern about speeding in our village. The association appreciates any resident taking their time to talk to the board about any issue, particularly one that impacts the safety of our residents. I'd like to personally thank this resident for his input. Since the safety of residents has always been a key consideration for our board, I decided to thoroughly investigate this resident's concerns and review our entire traffic safety program. First, let me start by reviewing what the resident said. He told the board that he was very concerned about speeding on village streets, that speeding has gotten worse and is a huge problem to the point that the quality of life in Hackberry Creek is being destroyed. To fix this problem, he proposed, 1, that we reduce the village speed limit to 20 miles an hour, 2, that we petition the Irving Police Department to enforce the speed limit in Hackberry Creek, and 3, that we install speed humps on village streets. Now, safety is very important to Hackberry Creek residents. Many residents moved into a gated neighborhood to be safer from crime, but also our residents want to feel safe on our village streets. As I said earlier, the board is very appreciative of resident input. We actually get very little input, and input is always welcome. To address the issues raised in this resident's concerns, the board decided to review our traffic safety policies. But since I'm retired and have the time, I decided to do an in-depth investigation of vehicle speeds on Hackberry Creek streets and also do a review of research about traffic safety. It turns out there are hundreds of studies about traffic safety on the internet. We actually had many years of data about vehicle speeds in Hackberry Creek. At this point, I probably have 30 or 40 hours of research invested in this project, but I thought that it was important to do a thorough job since this neighborhood is very important to me. In any event, here is what I found. First, let's talk a little bit about the goals for our village safety and traffic control. We want to adopt and enforce traffic rules and signage that, 1, follow established traffic safety guidelines. We are not experts in this area, so we wanted to listen to the experts. We don't want to let emotions rule. This is an area that can be very emotional for some, and it's important that we don't make decisions based on emotion. Second, we want to adhere to the provisions of local and state law. If we're going to enforce our traffic rules, we have a much stronger position if they are in harmony with local and state traffic laws. Third, it's important that we meet the standards of the Federal Highway Administration Manual of Uniform Traffic Control Devices, MUTCD. For example, our village stop signs are placed at standard height, standard location, and are standard size because of the MUTCD. Lastly, we want our village traffic rules reasonable and fair to all Hackberry Creek residents and guests. We're a neighborhood, and we want to be that we enforce our rules in a fair and reasonable manner. Let's talk for a few minutes about how speed limits are generally set and how speed limits in Hackberry Creek were set. I suspect that our village speed limits were originally set by the developer based on Section 545.352 of the Texas Transportation Code. That state law sets speed limits at 30 miles an hour for residential streets and 15 miles an hour for alleys. When we updated our street signage in 2004, we continued to follow the Texas Transportation Code residential speed limit standard. But there are other methods to set speed limits. The Office of Safety Programs of the Federal Highway Administration developed a tool called US Limits 2 to help in this effort. It's a web-based tool to help traffic professionals set reasonable, safe, and consistent speed limits on all types of roads, including residential streets. Its algorithm considers 15 factors. Among these are the number of lanes on the street, the length of the street, local area type that the street goes through, the number of pedestrians who are likely to be on the street, the number of curb cuts, that's driveways and cross streets, that enter the street, number of signals, if any, crash frequency on the street, the 85th percentile speed, number of vehicles per day, and several other factors. I was curious to see how U.S. Limits 2 would work in Hackberry Creek, so I entered the data for Summit View Drive into their website. In the case of this street, the street length is 1 mile, it's an undivided street, it's a residential collector street, the number of driveways and intersections is 53. We had 3 single vehicle crashes in the past 5 years on the street, and we have approximately 1,567 vehicles per day. This information, along with the other things required by the U.S. Limits 2 algorithm, was entered. When all the data was entered, the program produced a recommended speed limit. Interestingly, a U.S. Limits 2 recommends a speed limit of 30 miles per hour for Summit View Drive, exactly the speed limit that we currently have on it. There are other accepted methods for setting speed limits. It's very common to use the 85th percentile method. This method tracks the speed of free-flowing vehicles over a specified time period, then calculates the 85th percentile speed. That's the speed at or below which 85% of the people drive. Then it sets the speed limit within 5 miles an hour of this 85th percentile speed. Many experts use the 85th percentile method to set reasonable and safe speed limits in their areas. This method is based on the theory that a large majority of drivers are reasonable and prudent and don't want to have a crash. The speed at which, or at or below which, 85% of the people drive at any given location under good weather and visibility conditions may be considered as the maximum safe speed for that location. Here we might want to talk a bit about vehicle speeds and speed limits in the real world. What are the speed expectations of traffic experts? Well, traffic experts know that approximately 50% of vehicles will travel above the posted speed limit on a typical road. This is taken into consideration when the speed limit is set. And the Texas Department of Transportation has stated that their experience shows that the 85th percentile speed is the one characteristic of traffic speeds that most closely conforms to a speed limit which is considered safe and reasonable. Although lowering the speed limit is often seen by non-experts as a cure-all in preventing crashes, this is not the case. Crashes are most often the result of driver inattention and driver error. If a posted speed limit is unrealistically low, it creates a speed variance. For example, some drivers follow the speed limit while most drive the reasonable speed. This speed variance can contribute to crashes. Now let's talk about the actual speeds observed of vehicles traveling in Hackberry Creek streets. Summit View Drive is a street where we have had some complaints about excessive speed. It's also a street where we have lots of radar speed data. This graph shows clocked vehicle speeds on Summit View Drive from 60 separate clocking sessions. I know that some of you might have seen comments on social media suggesting that our radar data is not accurate. While we have procedural safeguards in place to assure accurate speed readings, I think the question needs to be addressed. So we asked the Irving Police Department to put their JMAR stealth radar unit on Summit View Drive for a full week last June. They clocked over 11,000 vehicles during that period. The results? The city JMAR radar speed data almost exactly paralleled the Hackberry Creek radar data. So if you hear someone disparaging the accuracy of our radar data, you can safely assume that they are ignorant of the true facts. What should be the homeowner association's speed control strategy on Hackberry Creek streets? Let me suggest some key points. One, we need to gather the facts and analyze them carefully. Don't let emotions trump facts. Two, if there are problems, we need to make reasonable decisions on how to fix them based on the facts. Our ultimate goal is safety. We want no accidents caused by excess speed. Certainly we want no injuries. We don't have very many vehicle-to-vehicle collisions in Hackberry Creek caused by speed or for other reasons. But how many have there been? Here we have the benefit of some facts. I asked the Irving Police Department to research their accident database to try to identify collisions in Hackberry Creek that could be attributed to excess speed. They found none in the past 5 years. We've had several accidents caused by distracted drivers or impaired drivers, but their database nor I can remember a single one that was speed related. But what should we do to keep this record intact? A resident suggested that we should ask the Irving Police Department to enforce speed limits in Hackberry Creek. Based on my conversations with Lieutenant Lewis Remington, head of the Irving Police Traffic Division about this, I think that I have a pretty fair idea of what we could expect in this case. First, the Irving Police Department would dedicate about 2 or 3 hours per year of radar on a street like Summit View Drive, and even less on less traveled streets. The Homeowner Association radar program had over 50 hours of radar on Summit View Drive last year. Second, they would probably use a 10-mile-an-hour speed allowance before issuing tickets on our streets. Third, they have the right to charge our residents for an officer's time when it is spent on traffic enforcement on private streets. Finally, such a program would depend on whether the City Council would even vote to allow traffic enforcement on private Hackberry Creek streets. Using the Irving Police Department to enforce speed limits in Hackberry Creek doesn't appear to be a very good alternative. Since the city is not likely to effectively enforce speed limits in Hackberry Creek, the Homeowner Association developed a radar enforcement program. This program began back in 2001. Since then, the HOA has checked speed on over 115,000 vehicles on village streets. And as I said earlier, our radar accuracy was confirmed by the Irving JMAR Stealth Radar Unit. Over the years, we have consistently found that about 4% of vehicles travel at speeds greater than 36 miles an hour on our streets. We had a resident say that speeding has gotten worse and is a huge problem to the point that our quality of life in Hackberry Creek is being destroyed. Since we have thousands of actual radar clockings over the years, we can test the validity of that statement. Here are the numbers for Hackberry Creek. In 2010, the average speed in our neighborhood, clocked over 12,000 vehicles, was 30.5 miles an hour. In 2015, 5 years later, we clocked over 10,000 vehicles, and the average speed was 30.2 miles an hour. This speed data does certainly not support the residents' assertion that speeds are out of control or increasing in our neighborhood. How about vehicles traveling greater than 36 miles an hour? In 2010, 3.9% of the vehicles were traveling at this speed. In 2015, it had not changed, still 3.9% of the vehicles. How about vehicles traveling greater than 39 miles an hour? In 2010, we clocked 1.14% of the vehicles at this speed. In 2015, it had dropped to 1.11%. Here's some of our 2015 radar program enforcement statistics. As we said, we clocked over 10,000 vehicles. 216 residents received warning letters for going over the enforcement threshold, in our case, of 36 miles an hour. 38 residents were fined. While we hear from a few residents who think traffic safety is a major problem in Hackberry Creek, how do the majority of our residents feel about the job the Homeowner Association is doing in the traffic safety area? Fortunately, we don't have to depend on anecdotal evidence or comments. It might be more emotion-based than fact-based. We have the residents' survey data. We had a very high response to our 2015 resident survey, 776 respondents. Of these, 73% of the respondents rated the HOA's enforcement of speed limits and stop signs to be excellent or good. In other words, for every resident who felt the HOA was doing a poor or very poor job, 7 rated the job as excellent or good. So much for history. What can the Homeowner Association do to improve our current traffic safety program? The non-debatable fact is that a supermajority of our residents are satisfied with our traffic safety program, but we can always get better. The board considered some possible changes to the radar enforcement program last year. One change would fine all speeders traveling 40 miles an hour or greater without first issuing a warning. I actually testified before the Texas Legislature Committee several years ago trying to get the authority to fine high-speed speeders. We actually had a bill introduced for us at that time but didn't pass. Well, the 2015 legislature decided to implement this change, so now we have the ability to fine speeders, serious violators, immediately without giving them a warning. The board decided that we would do this, and this has been in effect for several months. Maybe the lesson will be learned that we won't have any more 40-plus speeders in the neighborhood. Another possible change to the radar enforcement program is to reduce the speeding allowance from the current 6 miles an hour to 5 miles an hour before issuing a warning for the first offense or a fine for the second offense. Approximately 373 additional residents would get letters or fined if we made this change. After discussing it, the board decided not to implement this change at the current time. I actually discussed using a 5 mile an hour instead of a 6 mile an hour allowance with the Irving Police Department, and they did not recommend that we adopt this tighter standard. Obviously, the Homeowner Association takes traffic control in the village seriously, and we have the data to prove it. But after thinking about it, I decided to go to the experts, the traffic control section of the Irving Police Department, and ask them to evaluate the entire program. I contacted Lieutenant Lewis Remington, who is the head of the traffic section, Special Operations Division, Irving Police Department, and asked him to review our entire program and make recommendations on how we could improve the program. In order for Lieutenant Remington to be able to make informed recommendations, I supplied him with a good bit of information. First, the Hackberry Creek radar speed control and fine procedure. We actually have a very detailed procedure setting out everything from the number of vehicles checked per month to how we test the radar gun before and after each use to how letters are written and fines assessed for those people that we find speeding. I also gave him a copy of our 2015 Hackberry Creek radar data, over 10,000 radar clockings. And finally, although he already had it, I gave him another copy of the Irving JMAR radar data for the clockings that we had on Summit View Drive and on Southern Oak Drive. I asked Lieutenant Remington to review our program and either make recommendations for improving the program or issue a statement giving his opinion about the effectiveness of our current program. After reviewing our data, Lieutenant Remington told me that he had no recommendations for changes or improvements in the current program. He also issued a statement, and I'm going to quote some of it. I consider vehicle speeds on radar-monitored Hackberry Creek streets to be well controlled, and that the streets meet or exceed the residential speed control goals of the Irving Police Department. Lieutenant Remington continued, it's likely that the good speed control performance in your neighborhood is primarily due to the very active radar program. Finally, he said, I appreciate the efforts of the Hackberry Creek Homeowners Association and Hackberry Creek residents in helping keep Irving streets safe. Based on the review of our traffic control program by the Irving Police Department, our board made several decisions. First of these was to continue our current radar program as designed. Second, we decided to document the results of adding the immediate fine for 40-plus mile-an-hour speeders to determine if it should be expanded to all speeders in the future. Finally, we decided to work with the Irving Police Department by using their JMAR stealth radar unit as appropriate to continue to confirm the accuracy of our radar data. What can our residents do to help keep Hackberry Creek streets safe? Let me start by saying that no traffic control program will completely eliminate the small percentage of drivers who don't care about the safety of their neighborhood or consider themselves above the rules. Our current program will ultimately catch and fine them. However, besides driving safely themselves, our residents can have a role in the traffic safety effort. I encourage every Hackberry Creek resident to call the office with the license number of any vehicle that they see speeding or running stop signs in the village. While we may not be able to find these individuals based on this information, the village manager can certainly have a frank discussion with them about their driving behavior. I want to thank you for taking the time to listen to this presentation.